myself first of all. So I'm Simon Crowell. I work for a company called Phoenix Software, and we are working with the Trust around user adoption and user training around applications in M365 or N365 within the national NHS tenants. I've started the recording. You might see a transcript pane appear on the right of your screen. You can just close that. Also, you might see a little pop-up as well, which is just offering the privacy details, privacy guidance on recordings. Again, you can just close that if you want to do that. So I'm sharing my screen at the moment. The session that we've got today, I know there's just a couple of you from the Trust on the call. I've got a colleague, Ellie, on the call with me as well. Ellie's just going to keep an eye on the chat and any questions that are coming up if you raise your hands, etc. If I skip, if I miss those, so Ellie will prompt me if there's any questions. But given it's such a small group, we'll keep it very informal. We can have a discussion around Excel as we go through, and maybe at the end, if there's any time, we can look at particular use cases or pain points that you've got with Excel. So I won't go around the room, but because I don't want to, well, essentially, I was maybe going to ask you what you're using Excel for, but I'm sure we'll pick that up as we go through the session. As when the questions come up. So the session today, we've got around about an hour, 55 minutes left now. So I'll stick to about 3/4 of an hour, 50 minutes of content, and leave some time at the end for any questions and discussion. We are looking at Excel from an intermediate or advanced point of view. I am going to very quickly go through some of the basics though, because I will be using terminology, and I just want to just check that we understand that terminology and we're aligned on that terminology. You might call some of the features in Excel something different from the terminology that I'm going to use. So we're going to look at that. I'm going to show you some of the features working with spreadsheets within Excel. We're going to look at the flash fill and the fill handle, looking at some date formatting, conditional formatting, data validation. We'll look at some formatting, font and fill formatting, using things like the Format Painter and the Autofill Options Painter as well, Paste Special. And we're also going to look at copying and duplicating sheets. I'm going to show you some of the functions, such as VLOOKUP, and if we've got time, count A. I'm also going to look at custom lists as well. So hopefully this is what you were expecting from this session. I suspect that you're using Excel on a fairly regular basis within your work within the Trust, and you are likely to be seeing some of these features that I'm going to show you. But hopefully by the end of the session, I will leave you with some tips and tricks in Excel to make your work in Excel a little bit faster or more efficient, and hopefully you'll pick up on some things, even if you are already using some of the features that I'm going to show you. Any questions at this stage? Is that okay with everyone? We're aligned on the agenda there. Okay, so I'm just going to jump out of my slide deck, just bear with me. And first of all, I'm just going to show you a couple of ways that we can access Excel. So I'm in a browser at the moment, and I'm going to, in the address bar, type office.com, and I come into the office.com landing page. So this is M365. This is within your organisation here, so we can see it's the NHS tenant here. I've got the app rail down the left-hand side with the popular applications, including Excel here. So I can access Excel via the web here. So it means when I'm perhaps on another device or maybe working in another location, I can access all of my cloud files. So those files that are stored in SharePoint and OneDrive that I might be accessing via a desktop application, via the Excel desktop application. So I can see I've got some recent files that I've opened down here, including this one that I've called Excel Basic 2022-11-30, i.e. today's date. I'm going to be accessing that document via the desktop application. So because these are cloud documents and they reside in either my OneDrive or on SharePoint, it doesn't matter whereabouts I update these files, they're being automatically saved, and I can access the very latest version of those either via a desktop application or via a web browser. So that's enough of the web browser. I'm going to jump into the desktop application. I would imagine the majority of you are using Excel via the desktop application. That's your go-to place, but you do have access, as I say, via a web browser here. In fact, let me just open this file. I just want to show you the experience in the web browser. So very similar to the desktop application, we've got the ribbon and the tabs along the top, and essentially the same functionality. There is some functionality that's not available in the web browser and vice versa. So just need to be careful on that. I'm going to close that. And then I'm going to jump onto the taskbar at the bottom here, and notice I've got Excel pinned. I could use the start menu. I'm running Windows 11 here. Your start menu might appear down the left-hand corner there. So I can access Excel. I can use the search bar. I can use this search bar as well on the taskbar there. But I'm just going to click on this taskbar icon. And when we open Excel, we open on that a very similar landing page. We've got access to a blank workbook. We can start a new workbook, and we've got access to templates. If I click on more templates, we've got some additional templates, and they're grouped here. So we've got some suggested searches. So templates are a great place to start. They might not provide a final solution, but they will have some built-in formulas and functions in there. So it's worth having a look at those templates before you create a blank workbook. If you've got a specific requirement, there might be something in there. Let's go back to the home page here. So I've mentioned workbook and spreadsheet a few times. I'm just going to jump into this document again. It's the same one that I opened via a web browser. And I'm going to quickly, I know this is an advanced or intermediate session, but I just want to ensure that we're aligned with the terminology that we use. Have we got something in the chat? Let's have a look. Sorry, is it Namrata? What? Sorry, I missed when you added that to the chat. Was that in relation to something in particular? Did I ask a question? I can't remember.
No, I'm fine.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
You.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you did ask earlier, and then I said, is everything okay? And
right.
the sharing screen, and I said yes.
Yeah.
There is no problem. Yeah.
Sorry, that serves me right for not keeping an eye on the chat pane. I'll try and keep an eye on that. I've got that open now. Okay, so I'm in a workbook. So I've opened a workbook now. So that is our document, similar to a Word document. We call the actual document itself the workbook, and within that we can have worksheets or spreadsheets or sheets, and we can see those along the bottom here. I've got several spreadsheets within my workbook. So you can see spreadsheets as almost pages in a Word document, for example. So the workbook is the document, it's the file, and then we have pages or what we call spreadsheets within those, so or sheets or worksheets here. And within a workbook, the file, the document, we can have as many spreadsheets as we want. That's unlimited. We're only limited by our device's memory. And within each sheet, we have our spreadsheet. We have what we call columns and rows. So when we create a new document or workbook, we start by default with one worksheet or spreadsheet that is called Sheet 1. If we open a desktop and we start a new document, it won't automatically save. We'll need to save the this document or the workbook in a cloud location, and then we don't need to worry about hitting save. I can see that this auto save is on here. There we go. Let's bring that in focus. And I can also see the location of that as well. I can see that that's sat within documents on my OneDrive there. Notice as well, like Word, we can go into the version history here. So if we're collaborating on an Excel spreadsheet and something goes wrong, we need to go back to a previous version, or somebody's made some changes, we can always do that because this is a cloud document. We don't need to worry about versions. Here we've got a version history, and we can collaborate together on this document. So in this particular, in fact, let's create a new spreadsheet. So I'm going to click on this plus icon here along the bottom and create a new spreadsheet. And it's called that by default, sheet 1. We can right click on that and notice how we can rename. We can double click as well to rename. I've also got some other functionality such as delete. I can move or copy. And I can copy or clone a spreadsheet within a workbook, or I can copy it to a new workbook as well. So I can create a new workbook when I copy, or I can add to an open workbook. So I can copy my sheets across workbooks. But I've created a new sheet here just so that I can show you on a blank sheet some of the terminology that we use. So we have columns along the top, and we can have 64,000 columns per sheet. In fact, it's a little bit more than that. But if you just remember 64,000, I don't think you're ever going to hit that limit. We name our columns. So these are the verticals using the alphabet. So this is the name bar along the top for our columns. When we run out of alphabets, when we get to Z, we start with AA and then go AB, AC, etc. And we keep going like that, effectively infinitely, but up to 64,000 columns. These are our rows, these are the horizontals, and we number those. So we use numbers for those, and we can have 1 million rows within our within each spreadsheet within our workbook. So an infinite number of spreadsheets, 1 million rows per spreadsheet, and 64,000 columns. Now we name the intersection of a column and a row. This is what we call a cell, and that cell is named by the column and the row. So we've got what's called a name box up here in the top left hand corner, and I can see that the cell that I've highlighted is called B2 because it's at the intersection of column B and row 2. We then have what we call a formula bar. So what we see on the screen in the spreadsheet in the cell might be the output of a formula or a function. And I'm going to come on and talk about formulas and functions in a moment. We have what we call a cell range as well. So I've highlighted a cell here, B2. I can see that from the name box. I can highlight a cell range by left clicking on one cell and dragging to through a group of cells here. And this cell range that I've selected here, I've highlighted, is cell range B2, and we use the top left-hand cell and the bottom right-hand cell in our range. So this is called B2 through to D4. And the way that we write that in functions and formulas is B2 colon D4. So we can reference a cell range. I'm going to come on and talk about dynamic versus absolute cell referencing in a moment. This is also cell range. I know it's just in one column, but this is cell range B2 through to B3 or B2 colon B3. Again, the top left-hand cell and the bottom right-hand cell. I know we're only in one column, but that's still a cell range. This is a cell range. this is also a cell range. And we can quote those particular ranges with the top left-hand cell and the bottom right-hand cell. Okay, let's get rid of this spreadsheet that I've added. I'm just going to right-click and delete. And I'm going to jump onto this. Here's one I made earlier, Blue Peter style 2020 spreadsheet that I've called 2020. It's the calendar year. And let's just assume this fictional data that we've got here is a list of doctors within our practice, and it's month of the year, and this might be numbers of referrals to a specialist, for example. So we can see in January, Chris referred 11 patients to a specialist, Fred 19. So we've got some fictional data there. I'm just trying to add some context to that, and probably not particularly well, but anyway. And we want to do something with this data. For starters, we might want to format this table of data that we've got here. And you'll be familiar already with formatting in Excel. So similar to Word, we can highlight a cell. We can use the font group. This is what we call a group on our ribbon. We're on the Home tab. I'm in the font group, and I can use some of the formatting that we've got available. We can click on this this jump out icon here, which appears on some of our groups, which will give us access to more functionality within that particular group there of font. But what I want to do, sorry, is to make this cell bold, and I can do that by clicking on bold. Might want to make it italic, so I've emboldened and made that font italic. I can do the same on the next one, but that's quite a long-winded process. So I can just highlight all of my cells, make them bold and italics. Let's just get rid of that. I could do the same by selecting a whole row or a whole column. Let's select column A, make that bold and italics. Row 2, and I'm just having to click again on those because I've obviously got something bold and italics in one of the cells on that row. We can also use the format painter as well. So let's just switch that off a moment. And I'm going to make these two, bold and italic. Notice how I'm left-clicked on the first cell and I dragged across to the second cell, or I might have dragged right across the range there. What I can do is I can hit the format painter. And if I single click on that, notice that my icon has changed. It's now got that paintbrush there. And I can drag across another cell range, and it will apply that format painting, or it will apply that formatting, I should say. So that's what we call the format painter. I've selected that cell range and I copied them effectively. Let's just hit escape. Let me select them again. And if I hover over Format Painter with any of the other functionality and icons within our ribbon, if we hover over, we get a little explanation, in this case, quite a long explanation as to what that icon does, or that functionality does. If we double click, we've made that Format Painter sticky. So I can select some cells and notice how the paintbrush is still there. I could apply that to some other cells as well. So we've got that sticky paintbrush. I can hit escape, that will switch that off, or I could go and hit the format painter again and it will switch that off. I'm just going to format those particular cells there. Just looking at cell width as well, sorry, column width here. Notice how in the formula bar, we can see when I highlight cell L2 that I can see the whole word November, but it looks like it's been cut off because the column width is not wide enough, whereas December looks like it's spilling into cell N2. So what I can do is I can change the width of the columns, and I can do that by simply grabbing, if I hover over on the name bar at the top here, the line between two columns, I can simply left click and drag. Notice how the The column to the left looks like it's got a bit of a thicker line there, so it's showing that that's the column that I will be changing, and I can drag that column width. There's a feature here, so rather than just grabbing that line there, I can double click on it, and Excel will make the column as wide as the widest cell within that column. So, for example, if I double click between J and K, this column width will jump to be wide enough for J2, which contains September here. So I could do the same up here. I could highlight a column, or I could highlight a range of columns. I can go to the cells group, format, and I can change the column width there. Let me just bring that into focus. So I could change the column width for all those three. Notice how I changed 3 columns to be the same width here. I can select all of my columns, and I can double click on one of the lines between 2 columns, and all of the selected columns here will jump to the width of the widest cell within that column. Now, that's not particularly pretty because they're all a different width now based on the length of the word of the month, which is not great. But I can just simply drag now. So I could drag that group of columns to be wide enough so I can see all of the months in there. Or I could go into format, column width, and choose a column width there. I can do exactly the same with rows as well. I can make the row deeper or shallower, doing exactly the same functionality. I can double click. We might have some text in there that's over 2 lines. We might have the wrap text switched on. Okay, that's a bit on formatting. I'm going to come back and briefly show you formatting once I've shown you what we call the fill handle. So I'm going to show you the fill handle now. I'm going to start to look at some formulas and functions. So I'm now in Excel, and you'll be familiar with this, that we can refer to cells, we can add some formulas in there. You'll be doing that already in Excel. So when we create a formula, we can type the cell name, we can type numbers in our formula, or we can click on cells at the point where we want to insert a cell or a cell range. So for example, if I wanted to say this cell, and we always start a formula, and I can type in the cell, or I can type in the formula bar at the top. This cell is equal to, and I could start to type a cell name, so B3, and notice how Excel will highlight that cell, plus B4, and it's chosen a different colour for the second cell in my formula. I could keep going, plus B5. So I've created a formula there that's adding up. If I click in the formula bar, it's showing me the cells that it's adding up there. We're using the plus or the add functionality there. So let's just delete that formula. Notice how the output, the result of that formula is displayed in the cell, but we've got the formula in our formula bar there. I know, or what I'm wanting to do is actually add up all of the referrals in the month of January and do the same for the rest of the months of the year. I also want to add up the totals for each of our doctors here for the whole year and put those results at the end here. So I can use a function, and if we click on the formula bar, I'm still in that cell, and I got a collection or a library of functions here, and they're grouped together. And I know that I want to use the sum function, so I could look in maths and trig, or math and trig, sorry for the Americanism there, and I could run right down towards the bottom to find sum, because I want to sum up these figures here. So let's choose sum. And we get this pop-up box that's asking us for the number range here. So I'm just going to, it's trying to guess what we want to do here. And it's looking at all the cells above this cell. And we've got that range in B3 through to B8. There we go. So we've got our result in there. We can see the formula. Let's delete that. I could type that in. And when I start to type a function, I can select it and then it will prompt me. I could type my cell range, or I can select my cell range and I don't need to use the closing brackets here or parentheses. I can just hit enter and the system will understand and add that in for me there. So Namrata, have you got a question there?
Simon, will you please remind again? Can you go through again, please? I just missed a few bits.
Yeah. Which bit are you wanting me to look at?
Just the sum, yeah, all the totals.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm going to show you some tips and tricks to make your life a little bit easier with Excel. But just with, if I wanted to sum up this this column here, so I wanted the sum of all of this data that's available in here. I can go to the formula the formula tab, and see this function library, math and trig, go down to sum, and it's prompting me, it's trying to guess what I want to do here. So I can just hit OK, because it's got the cell range B3 through to B8. I'm going to delete it, just hit the delete key, and I'm going to type that that function in there instead. So I'm going to say this cell is equal to, so I'm typing equals, and then I'm typing sum, and I can do that in lowercase or in uppercase. Oops. And notice as I start to type, I'm offered up a search result for the functions there. So I can choose sum, or I can just type sum, and then I can open my brackets, and then I can type my number range, or I can select my number range that I want to, or cell range that I want to sum up. I put the closing brackets on, I don't need to. So we've got our formula there. Now, I could go on and do the same in this cell, but what I want to do is I want to know a quicker way to do that across all of these columns here. So you will have noticed what we call the fill handle. So that little green square in the bottom right-hand corner of a selected cell is what we call the fill handle. So what I can do is I can grab hold of that fill handle by hovering over until my cursor changes to a different shape, left click, and then drag across the range that I want to apply that same function to. So let's just have a look at the functions or the formulas that we've got. So we've got this cell is equal to sum, and it's got the cell range B3 through to B8. This is what we call a dynamic cell range. If I click in this cell now, I notice that the system has changed this next one to be C3 through to C8. So it's changed that cell range for me because we're using what's called a dynamic cell range. I'm going to talk about absolute cells or cell ranges in a moment. So I've dragged that along, and I've got my formula now right across my columns. So I've got that total there for each of my months. I want to do the same with the doctors, so we can apply the same. But this time I'm just going to show you, rather than me typing this cell is equal to sum, I can use this auto sum that's available on the editing group on the home tab on the ribbon. So I can just simply hit auto sum, and notice how it's selected. It's tried to guess what I'm wanting to do here. It's selected my range. I can just hit enter. So we've got our sum in there. And then I can double click on the fill handle this time rather than drag. Because I'm in a column, I can double click and it will go right down to the bottom of my data range, I can continue to drag that one cell further on. So we've got a grand total there. So let me just delete all of that and just show you how we can fill that in very quickly and do the same on here. I could have double clicked on there as well. Let's do that. And then I can drag it up one cell further down. But just a quick tip and trick for you here. If you've got a data table like this, let's just show you how you can very quickly add that add those totals to your columns and your rows. So let's select our data range. I'm left clicking on the top left hand cell of my data range, and I'm dragging down to the bottom right. And without letting go of my mouse, I want to go one column further along and one row further down and let go. And then keyboard shortcut, if I press Alt and equals, that will automatically add my my sums in there. So all I did then, I'll undo, but oops, get rid of that. Select my cell range, go one column further on, one row further down, Alt and equals, we've got our totals in there. Let me just select my cell range again. You might not have noticed this in Excel, but we do get some statistics on the cell range that we've selected, and these appear at the bottom here. So I've got the sum of the cell range here. So it's added those up. I can see that that matches my formula that I've added. I've got the highest number here because I've switched this on, and I've got the count of numbers in there, and I've got the average. So I can see those stats, and if I right click on that bar at the bottom there, I can switch on some of the other stats. So I can switch on minimum number in there. So I can see that the lowest number is 1 in that range. The maximum is 34. So we can get some quick stats. So this is just, rather than adding a formula or a function to our spreadsheet, if we just wanted to quickly add up a range of cells, we could just see that there at the bottom. I can see that the sum is 138. It matches the formula that I've put in there. And I can also copy and paste this quickly. So if I wanted to copy this and paste it into another application like Word, or paste it into Excel, I can just left click and then I can paste it. So I can go to paste here. Oops, I've got some, let me just turn off. I've used this spreadsheet before and I just want to make sure I've got general and not currency switched on. So I've just copied and pasted that very, very quickly. Now, the difference is if I paste that, if I click in there, I can see it's just a value. It's not a formula. Whereas I've pasted it in the wrong cell. There we go. Let's paste it in there. Whereas this is a formula, I've just pasted a value. So if I were to change, say, this particular cell to 10, this will update, but because I've just pasted a value, that won't update. Whereas if I were to hover over and see the stats at the bottom there. Now let's look at absolute cell range versus dynamic. So I mentioned when I dragged along a formula here that we were using this dynamic cell range. I'm going to show you absolute cell range now in a moment. I'll use in absolute cells. But you're all with me. Do you all understand that? Are you using some of this functionality already?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to apply a similar formula. So let's put something up here. Let's put the cost, and we're going to say it costs £100 for every referral in admin costs for every referral of a patient to a specialist. So what I can do is I can calculate my costs across the year. I can look at the total cost per month, and I might want to look at the cost per practitioner per doctor. So I'm going to apply a formula. So I'm going to say this cell is equal to the sum of all of the referrals in that month times by, and we use asterisks. I want to quote this cell here, Q2. Yeah. So I've got my COSA. I've not got any, excuse me, any formatting for my currency yet, but we can apply that in a moment. So I'm going to take my fill handle and see what happens when I try and drag the formula across here. And bearing in mind, this is using dynamic cell references. We've got B9 times by or multiplied by Q2. So if I try and drag my formula along using the fill handle, we've got a problem. So let's investigate what's going on here. So in this cell, I can see it's B9 times by Q2, and that's correct. But if I now click in this cell to the right, it's now C9. If I click in the formula bar, I can see the cells that it's trying to use here. C9 times R2. So rather than Q2, it's used R2 there. So it thinks we want to move along. So it's trying to be clever, but it's not quite got it right. So how we can stop that is we want B9 to be dynamic because every time we move along, we want to refer to C9, D9, etc. But we want Q2 to be fixed. So what we can do is we can change this to an absolute cell reference. And we use what's called, or we use the function key F4 to do that. So I'm in my formula bar for this first formula, and I can hover anywhere about that Q2, have my cursor either at the start, middle, or end, and hit F4. So this is to turn this to an absolute cell reference. I can make an absolute column reference or a row reference. So we could keep column Q dynamic and have row 2 absolute. So that would be Q$2, or vice versa. We could have $Q2, which would keep the column absolute and the row dynamic. But in this case, I want to keep a cell absolute. Hit enter. I've got the same output here, 10,700, but the formula is slightly different in that we've got an absolute cell reference. If I drag my formula along or my fill handle, that's sorted out the problem for us. So let's click in another cell. We've got C9 times by $Q$2. Let's get rid of our formula there. Now I mentioned the name box. So this cell that I've highlighted with our cost is called Q2. I'm going to rename this by clicking in the name box here. I'm going to call this cost. So now I've got rid of the need to use dynamic versus absolute cell referencing. I can reapply my formula, or rebuild my formula here. So let's say this cell is equal to the sum multiplied, and I'm going to start typing the name of that cell because I renamed it to cost. And notice how it's offering up those names in there. If I hit enter, I can then apply my costs or my formula across that whole range. So I've got my total costs here. Okay, any questions on that? So just wait for Amra typing away there. Right. Okay, thanks for that. So I've just gone to this other spreadsheet called 2021. It's very similar data. I just wanted to show you that we can refer to cells and ranges of cells and use formulas across our spreadsheet. So I've got one called summary here, and I don't think I've got any formatting on. But let's say that we want to have we want to have a summary page from these two spreadsheets here. So what I'm going to do is say this cell is equal to, and I'm going to jump back to 2020 and click in A3 and hit return. So when I click in that cell, I notice the formula is referring to the name of the spreadsheet in single quotes, and then a streak or an exclamation mark, and then the cell A3. So that's referring to that particular cell there. If I then drag this down, oops, I've gone a bit too far. I'll just go to there. I've got these formulas now referring using the dynamic cell range there. I can then add my years in. I'm just going to type these. And we're going to say this cell is equal to, and I'm going to double click. And I'm going to say this cell is equal to, I'm going to go on the 2021 year, and then we can double click. And then we could add our auto sum fill by selecting the range, one column extra, one row extra, and hitting Alt and equals. And very quickly, I've created myself a dynamic summary page. So if any of this information changes, let's remember 2500. And if I change this to 23, for example, go on to our summary, it's automatically updated because it's using formulas. Yeah. Okay, let me just jump back to 2020. And I said that I wanted to show you formatting using that fill handle. So if we remember, we've got a fill handle on the bottom right-hand corner. So what I can do is I can just apply formatting. And you might have noticed when I drag my fill handle, let's go down here. It's can see, and it's following a series here. It understands its months here, so it's followed a series. You might have noticed that we get this this little box appear. And this is our autofill options, and this is contextual based on the series that we're trying to autofill. And if I click on the little drop down here, I've got various options here. I could click on copy cells, which is going to copy December right through all of these cells, or I can fill formatting only. So that's another way that we can apply formatting similar to the format pane there. I'm just going to hit undo. Any questions? I'm conscious of time and I want to make sure I've covered off a fair bit of this. Is this helpful? Is this some of these tips and tricks? Are you using them already? Remember, you'll
some of this stuff already. I was hoping to learn some more about VLOOKUPs and pivot tables.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I'll get on to that. I'll just very quickly show you dates and that fill handle again. So let's look at the date on Monday. And notice when I'm in a cell and I'm typing a date, the number formatting is general. Let's make this cell wider. When we see those hash tags there, or those hashes, that means that the data contained within the cell is too wide for the column. When I use the fill handle here for dates, we can see that it applies those dates. It's picked up on the series on there. I just want to quickly go into here and show you that we can reformat our date. So I can go into more number formats and click on custom, and then we can look at this sample here. So if I start to type D, we get the output of the two-digit month there, two-digit date, sorry. If it was the 7th of, say, December, it would appear as 7. However, if we put 2 Ds, it would be 07. If I continue to type Ds, I get the short name of the day. If I continue and have 4, then we've got the full name of the day. I can do the same with months, for example. So single-digit month, two-digit month, short month. Well, I need to put the date in there first. Let's do that, and then the month. And if I keep typing, I get the short month, long month. There we go. I'm going to fill this down. You might be doing rotas here, and you might want to exclude weekends. So let's click on that fill options here. And again, remember it's contextual, so we can click on fill with weekdays. That will automatically remove our weekend days there. Flash fill quickly, we can provide an example. So I might want to split this full name column here into forenames or given names and surnames. I've typed an example there. I'm going to click Control and E. I could go on the data tab and use flash fill. So we just need to provide enough of an example for Excel to understand. Authors. I might do something like, oops, let's say USD. We can do the same. Control E, 100. We could do something similar with text to columns, but flash fill is much easier. Are you familiar with conditional formatting? I'll just show you that very quickly. On the Home tab, I've selected my cell range, conditional formatting. We've got various automatic options here for us, or we can build our own rule. We've got color scales, or oops, I could use maybe highlight the any cell that's less than say 10. By default, it will look at the whole number range and give us the average there. I'm going to say 10 instead, and I can choose the options for how we want to fill that. Yeah. Data validation. I think I've switched off validation. Let me just check. Where are we? Yeah. So this is the we could create a drop-down list, for example. Charlotte, I don't know if you're doing this currently. On the data tab, say for example, let's pick a range here, and we want to use this as a lookup or a list here, and we want to drop down. So I've selected a range of cells. I'm going to click on data validation. So this is where we can set validation here. So we can say that by default, any value can be typed in this range of cells. We could change this so it's got to be a whole number, or it's got to be a decimal, or it's text of a certain length. But I'm going to use list here. And then we get this source list here. So this is our list array that we want to provide. So I'll click in here and choose my list and then hit OK. We've now then created a drop down here so we can select our data from a drop down. If I try and put something something in here that doesn't appear in our list, so let's look at a mat. It's going to come up with an error message. VLOOKUP, oh, let me just get rid of that. VLOOKUP then, Charlotte, are you using data validation like that with lists?
No, didn't know about that, so that's good, thank you. Okay,
let's use, so we've got about 10 minutes left. Let's concentrate on VLOOKUP and pivot data, pivot tables as well. So in a similar vein, let's select and add some data validation. I'm going to add a list here, and I'm going to select my list. This time I've got a table or an array of data here with unit costs. So I've now got some drop downs here. I can add quantities, so we're going to have 3 desks and we're going to have 10 keyboards. So what I can do now, I can use what's called VLOOKUP. So let's go in this unit cost here. And we want to look up, based on this information here, we want to look up the cost of these items. And then we're going to put formula in for the total. So I can go to the formulas and I can use lookup and reference. And I'm going to use VLOOKUP. So we want to look up the value based on this cell here. And we want the table array here. And we know that the output is in column 2 in relation to our table array. And we need to just add false in here. So it's now built this formula for me. And I can drag this down, but I might need to just check on that. So it's changed our table array. So again, absolute versus dynamic cell references. If I click on that table array there, that's wrong. So what we need to do is we need to go back to our original formula, and I'm going to change this using F4. And so that A7 has become $A, $7, and B12 becomes $B, $12. And then I can apply this down here. And this will be the right.
What's the reason you put false at the end, please?
So this is, if it's true, it's looking for a near match. If it's false, it's an exact match. Do you want me to show you that again? So say, for example, I use the lookup reference. There is a bit of an explanation on here. So where are we? If I click in range lookup, so it's a logical value to find the closest match in the first column.
Okay, that makes sense.
Or
thank you.
An exact match. So in my case, I want to use an exact match, and I'm looking up the data anyway. I'm using a list validation there, so it will be an exact match anyway. Yeah, does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah.
So I've got an error here, and that's going to be problematic. So we're going to put a formula in here. So we want to say that this cell is equal to the unit cost times the quantity. And when we fill down here, that error has been transcribed across into our line total. We can actually add an if error function. My keyboard's going to type if error. And what I can do is output 0 if there's an error. And I can fill that down. And that's got rid of my errors there. So it's that you can embed functions within functions here. So I've used the if error function, and then everything inside of that, it's looking at the output from this function here. And it's saying if that's in error, then output 0. Yeah. So I've just embedded a function within a function there. Any questions? Shall I run through pivot tables very quickly?
Yes, please, if you've got time.
Yeah, no worries. I would always recommend inserting a table, and you might know about tables, you might not. So when we've got a table in Excel, we can use that for other functions. We can apply formulas and functions across a table. Whenever additional data gets added to a table, then our functions and formulas will continue. We don't need to then drag them further down the table when we add new data. So I select my data, and I'm going to say insert table. And I'm going to create this as a table now, because it's the table I'm going to reference in my pivot table. My table has headers. And I've created a table now, and I get this additional contextual tab here. If I click on that, I can see the table is called table 1. So let's leave that highlighted. and let's hit pivot table. Now, normally, if I insert a pivot table from the insert tab and hit pivot table, I would need to choose my range. I might have already selected that. But in this case, because I've got things in a table, it's referring to the table rather than the cell range. This will just make it easier if my table or the data within this particular table here changes. Let's say we want to add it as a new worksheet. Now it's asking me to add the fields. We've got our 3 columns here. So I want to add the trust name to my rows, and I just picked that up and grabbed it. I could just tick it and it will try and guess where I want to put that. Let's have hospitals as children underneath the trust name. So we've now got an expandable section there, collapsible section. And I want my auditor on the columns, but I also want a count. So this is a sum of the values here. So I can expand and collapse these sections. I can see a summary of that particular trust there. And then I've got my hospitals and I've got my totals in that. Now, just remember 44. And the reason why I said use a table, if I go back to my, where are we? Here we are. If I were to add another line in here, so let's add Chris. Can you tell I'm in York? And then I go back on here, I can refresh, hit refresh, and I don't need to worry about going in and changing the range again. It will automatically update because I've referred to a table rather than a range. Okay. I did want to very quickly show you custom lists if we've got time. Are you okay for another minute or so? Was that useful, Charlotte?
Yeah, really useful. Thank you.
And you'll have the recording. I know I went through that very quick there, but you'll have the recording so you can refer back to that. I want to create a custom list. So we've got lists in Excel. And things like short months, long month names, short days, etc. They're built in, but we can create custom lists. So I'm just selecting a list of my doctors here. This might be a list of items that I regularly use or that I want to sort my data against. So I can't think of a good example other than a list of doctors, but I'm sure you'll have some use cases. Let's go to File, and I'm going to go on to Options, and I'm going to click on Advanced, and I'm going to scroll right down towards the bottom here, and I'm going to click on Edit Custom Lists. Now, because I selected my list here, it's already got that cell range in there. And notice I've got my existing lists on my the ones that come packaged with Excel. So I've got my short day names, long day names, short months, etc. So when I do the autofill handle, this is what the system is using for that series. So now I can just import my new list and then click OK. And then let's get rid of that. And then when I type an item, I can use my autofill handle here. I can also sort data. So if I wanted to sort data via a custom list, I can do that. So I've created a custom list for sorting as well. I just wanted to very quickly show you that at the end. So it's definitely worth exploring the formulas and look at the functions library and have a look what's available to you. There's loads of resources on the web, lots of YouTube videos, or please come back to us if you want any further information around how to use Excel and some of the functions and formulas. So that was a quick whistle-stop tour in an hour. Hopefully it's been useful and you've learned some new tips and tricks on that. As I say, you'll be able to access the recording from the meeting chat afterwards as well. Stop that recording.